We've been working through the 12 steps of AA for the last 11 weeks plus. And we're on step 12, if you can believe it. So this is our final step. And if you're joining us for the first time or you really didn't catch much of the series, what we've been doing is the 12 steps of AA may sound very singular and very specific for a specific purpose in terms of alcoholics, but we have realized since the beginning, 25 years ago when I started working in recovery, that everybody is recovering from something. And we all have something that is down deep that hasn't been resolved. And to the extent that it is not resolved, we're going to paper it over with something, some kind of mental distraction or whatever it may be. So if it's not substance abuse per se, then it's going to be some sort of process addiction, something that we use to try to get through that unresolved information. And so the 12 steps really apply to all of us. The 12 steps are a codified way through Jesus' journey that Jesus took and which is modeled for us in the Gospels. So we've been taking the 12 steps from a New Testament point of view, linking it to Jesus' teaching and Jesus' way, and hopefully that we can then broaden the scope so we can see how all of us need to take this circular journey as we're going to talk about this morning. Let's just take a look at step 12. Because it's bringing it all together. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So here we are looking at 3 parts to this 12 step. 3 parts, right? We've had a spiritual awakening. We're going to try to carry this message to others. And also we're going to practice all these principles in our daily affairs. 3 parts to it. But before we get into the actual parts, I want to back up a little bit. Because it's interesting to me to just consider the number 12. In our Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, numbers are significant. Numbers mean something, and we don't realize that. And of course, if we think of numerology or something like that, then we're thinking of the occult. It has nothing to do with that. The Jews were ingenious in this. They had a system of numbering and a system of lettering that had layers of meaning attached to it. So each letter of the alphabet, of the 22 letters of the alphabet, had a name and a meaning attached to it. And when you combine those letters into roots and then into words, you were combining the meanings of each of those letters to create the concept that you wanted to convey with the word, right? Numbers work exactly the same way. Each number also had a meaning attached to it. And then each number related to each letter of the alphabet. So the alphabets had numbers, the alphabet letters had numbers, and so they had their own meanings and names, and then the numbers had their meanings. And so here's this complex meaning system between numbers and letters. You could take the letters of a word, like my name, David. If you add up all the numerical equivalents of each one of those words, Dalet, Vav, Dalet, you would get the number 14. And so we see 14 showing up in the genealogies of Jesus, not because those are the actual numbers of generations, 7 and 14, but because they were trying to convey that Jesus was a descendant of the house of David. And so this is the way numbers show up and the meanings of numbers show up in our Bible. And each of the integers had a number. So 1 was oneness, obviously, unity, one thing. 2 was generation or production. 3 was completion. You know, the first stable thing we can build has to have at least 3 legs. 4 is the number of the earth, north, south, east, and west, the compass rose, right? 5 was the number of initiation or the number of man, because man has 5 points. People do, right? Head, hands, and feet. 6 was the number of incompletion because it preceded 7, which was the number of spiritual perfection. And the idea there was there are 6 spatial directions, up and down, side to side, back to front. 1 more than that would be spiritual perfection. 1 less than that, 6, would be imperfection. And another number for man, because we all know we're not perfect, right? And then 1 more than 7, 8, would be the number for rebirth. And so you have these numbers. And then what you can do is you can actually factor them, right? And so 3 times 4, 12, would take the number meanings of 3 and 4, perfection and earth, and then create a new meaning for the number 12. And when you look at 12 in the scriptures, where you find 12, it's always significant in that particular way. There were 12 patriarchs from Shem to Jacob, right? There are 12 sons of Jacob, which correspond to the 12 tribes of Israel. There are 12 apostles that Jesus appoints. When the New Jerusalem descends from the heavens in the book of Revelation, there are 12 foundation stones. And above those stones is the name of each of the 12 apostles. There are 12 gates, and each gate has an angel. And each gate is made of a single pearl. And above those gates is inscribed the name of each of the 12 tribes. The actual city itself was a giant cube that was 12,000 stadia, one of their units of measure, on a side. And it was also 144 cubits high. A cubit was the distance from your fingers to your elbow. And of course, 144 is 12 times 12. So all of the dimensions of the New Jerusalem are 12. And I've watched Bible commentators take that literally and try to calculate how many rooms you could get in a cube that was 12,000 stadia on a side, right? And try to take it literally. And what we're really talking about here is 3 times 4. We're really talking about perfection times the world. And what does that mean at all? It's the perfection or the completion of the earth or earthly systems, earthly rule, earthly government. So if you think about that, the completion or the fulfillment of earthly systems, rule, and government, do you see how number 12 was conveying that? By numbering 12 in all of these areas. And why the number 12? Well, because in the number 12, we're talking about a complete cycle. If you think about the year, what have we got? We've got 12 months, right, from this circle. And why do we have 12 months? Because there are 12 lunar orbits within the solar year. And in the solar year, we have the 12 zodiac constellations all around the ecliptic. And so in a given year, every time that the sun rises, it's going to rise each month in a different constellation around the 12. And so 12 became the number of a complete cycle, a perfect journey, if you will. And this plays out in ways that you don't even expect. When Jesus uses the word Gehenna, that's the word that we translate as hell. Now, we have an idea of what hell means, but it comes culturally from our own roots, non-Hebrew roots. The word itself comes from Norse languages. But we think of hell as a place of eternal damnation. When the Jews thought of Gehenna, Gehenna was a place of purification. It was much like Catholic purgatory. You didn't stay there forever. And the fires that burned there weren't there for punishment, for pain. They were there for purification. Because in the ancient world, without refrigeration, without antibiotics, you had 2 things that could purify: fire and salt. That's what you had to work with. And so the fires of Gehenna were there to purify. And the maximum time that you would stay in Gehenna was 12 months. Obviously symbolic, right, of a complete cycle of purification. And in fact, the Kaddish, the prayer for the dead that the Jews would say ritually, you would say it the longest for your parents because you were supposed to honor your parents. Do you know how long you would say the Kaddish for your parents? 11 months. Why 11 months? Because if you said it for all 12, you were saying that they were as bad as they could possibly be, and they had to stay there for the whole time. But I hope that you're getting my point. You know, what the number 12 signifies is full circle, a complete cycle, a complete journey. Now, did the framers of the 12 steps, were they aware of this? Were they deliberately making this 12 steps? I have no way of knowing that. But it's kind of fortuitous that it did, because the 12 signifies a complete journey that we would be taking, a completion of the cycle. But not only the completion of the cycle, but understanding it only as the beginning of the next cycle, a never-ending set of cycles. We don't do the steps once. We're doing them in never-ending journeys that are circular in nature. And to try to put a little finer point on that, one of my favorite poets of all time is T.S. Eliot. Do I have any T.S. Eliot fans in here? Okay, got a couple. Good. Yeah, of course you would. Anne, fellow UK person there. He was kind of a British American, but you can claim him if you'd like. One of his greatest works was the four quartets, and the last of the four poems of that series was called Little Gidding. And in it, there's a very famous line that I know you've all heard, but I wanted to read just a little bit of an extended passage and listen to what Eliot is saying about the never-ending cycles. You know, he doesn't use the number 12, but it's the 12ness of these cycles that we keep moving through and moving through and moving through. He says, what we call the beginning is often the end. And to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. Every phrase and every sentence is an end and a beginning. Every poem an epitaph. And any action is a step to the block, to the fire, down the sea's throat, or to an illegible stone. And that is where we start. We die with the dying. See, they depart, and we go with them. We are born with the dead. See, they return and bring us with them. The moment of the rose and the moment of the yew tree are of equal duration. A people without history is not redeemed from time, for history is a pattern of timeless moments. So while the light fails on a winter's afternoon in a secluded chapel, history is now. With the drawing of this love and the voice of this calling, we shall not cease from exploration. And at the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Love that. What is he saying? He's saying that time itself, life, experience, is a never-ending cycle of cycles. And what we're saying is that the steps are the same. These 12 steps is like a snake eating its tail. And that symbol was hugely important in the East to symbolize that the end is just another beginning. We're constantly moving in the circular path. The beginning is not an ending. It is the beginning of another cycle. And overall, the steps, what they're actually representing is a serial surrender. It's just too big to surrender all at once, especially when what is at stake for us as human beings, what we're trying to actually lay down, everything that we think is really us, we can't do it all at once. Just too much for us, too big. So here's this serial surrender. Each step is another step in this serial surrender, laying down more and more, becoming less and less, as John the Baptist said, to decrease so that he may increase. All this is happening for us. Step by step, a letting go, a stripping away of anything that is untrue in us. Just too big to do all at once. But in the first step, we start with humility, don't we? And humility comes from the word humus, which means earth. It means dirt. It means the ground. So we're starting from the ground. We're starting from the humility of powerlessness, right at step one. So if you're starting from powerlessness and you're already starting from the ground, you might be thinking, well, what's left to strip away then? Didn't we actually start at ground zero? Well, here's something to think about. The powerlessness of step one is rarely conscious for us. We're rarely fully aware of what it means to be powerless. Again, it's just too big a concept. It's too all-encompassing of everything that we're about. So we start with the concept of powerlessness to signify an end to the resistance that we have to submission. It's the end of resistance, and it's the beginning of submission that we will need if we're going to take any further steps along the journey. We need to start there, even if we really don't understand the radical nature of what powerlessness is trying to teach us, what it's trying to tell us. And so as we start, at least with the understanding that we're going to need to submit to a power greater than ourselves, each step along the way of those 12 is further defining what it means to be fully powerless, fully dependent, connected, and one with what is greater than ourselves. Not just unseen God, but also our community, our family, everyone around us. We start with that concept. It ends our resistance, or at least enough of a resistance so we can take the next step forward. And then each step is taking us further to become more and more aware of the truth of what this is all about. We've had a couple of different ways of looking top down at the 12 steps. Well, here's another one. In steps 1 to 3, what we're really learning to do there in those steps is to accept ourselves as we are, to admit that we're powerless, to believe that there's a power greater than ourselves, to give ourselves over to that power. Is it finally accepting ourselves as we are, that we need help, that we're not going to do this on our own. All of those things. And then steps 4 to 11 are becoming our best selves by continuing to clear out the dysfunction, to clear out the false core beliefs, to clear out all the programming, to repair our relationships as best as they can be repaired because of our dysfunction. And then step 12 is a sharing of ourselves, of bringing it back full circle, not seeing it as an ending, but seeing it as a new beginning. If you really think about what the steps are doing for us, it's kind of a form of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. You know, I always look at Jesus as the original CBT therapist. I mean, he was teaching us how to be able to change the way that we think and the way that we behave from the inside out. Not just doing it as a matter of obedience, but actually transforming from the inside out so that all our thoughts and all our actions always pointed to Father, always pointed to perfect love, always affirmed our relationships. But there's a problem with CBT because some of us are so down on ourselves. If you tell someone that you need to change in order to be acceptable, what does that do to you? Right? And so there was a brilliant woman named Marsha Linehan who had borderline personality disorder. She spent some time in the East trying to figure it out because CBT certainly wasn't working for her. She was a clinical psychologist. And so she realized that the missing part was what she called dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT. Dialectical is a word that simply means that you're working through or acting through opposing forces. And what are the opposing forces that she's working through? It's change. We already knew that from CBT. But the opposing force that was missing was acceptance. In DBT, you try to balance acceptance and change. She called it radical acceptance. You had to really be able to accept yourself as you are, even as you start to work for change. You know, we're kind of getting back to the Hebrew bride, right? Waiting for the groom to come, waiting for life to completely change, and yet accepting that this is her family now. And it may be the only time left that she has with her family. When the groom comes, she's being taken away. Balancing now and not yet. Acceptance and change. First 3 steps of the 12, accepting us as we are. Next, 4 to 11, helping us to change into our best version of ourselves. And then step 12, reminding us, yeah, we need to start over again and continue these loops. And now we have something that we can actually bring to others. And so here we are. We can only share in step 12. We can only give what we have inside. That's all we can ever share. What do we actually have? We can only share or give who and what we are. In truth, we're always sharing, quote unquote, right? There's always going to be someone in our blast zone, as long as they're having a proximity to us. There's always going to be someone who's going to get what we have. The question is it a blessing or is it a curse? What is it that we're actually sharing? If we have not gotten to the point where we actually know our true self, then we're going to be sharing the confusion and the turmoil of our egoic false self. And we won't even know that we're doing it. We won't understand why our relationships are always sideways. We won't understand why life is so difficult. We won't understand why we're always so anxious, because we haven't gotten to the place of awareness yet. But when we finally can break through, the spiritual awakening is about that breakthrough. If we can break through and start to know our true self, who we really are, then we can help. And even if we're not formally sponsoring someone or formally doing that help, just bringing connection to the table, the ability to connect, the ability to really be vulnerable enough to be defenseless enough to connect. That insight is what we bring. And now we are glue. Now we are holding relationships together. So how do the 12 steps actually help us to know ourselves? How do they help us along this process? Another one of my favorites is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, of course, Sherlock Holmes, right? I have a little quote here. I don't know if Alex is going to put it up, but it's in your handouts if you want to read along, but it's only one simple line. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard it a million times. Once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. Gotta love that. See, this is what's happening in the 12 steps. The 12 steps continue to separate us from the untruths. At a certain point, however improbable it is, all that's going to be left is who we really are. And who are we really? Well, we're created in God's image. That's covered over with all of this stuff. I love the analogy of Michelangelo when he was commissioned to do a sculpture. Someone just went to Florence and they saw the David and they were just, the thing is so amazing to just stand there and look at this. But to realize that once that was just a block of stone, just a block of stone. And how a man can, or a woman, can walk around a block of stone. And the way Michelangelo described it is he would walk around the block of stone, imagining whatever the finished sculpture was going to be inside the stone as if frozen in a block of ice. And he says, and once he had that completely imagined down to the last vein and muscle, he said the only thing that left to remain to do was to remove everything that wasn't David. Everything that wasn't the horse or whatever it is he was going to sculpt. That's really what's happening to us. As we move along the 12 steps, as we move along life, the abrasion of life is removing everything that we allow it to remove. Kind of like sandblasting away. Because sitting inside each one of you right now is God's image, is your true self, is your best self. Always there, always has been from the moment you took your first breath. It's just been covered over. That's why Jesus keeps holding up children as the emblem of kingdom. They don't have that stuff covering over them yet. It happens later. Our job is to remove everything that's not the horse, everything that is not our best self. And what is left at the end of that process, however improbable, is who we really are, created in God's image. And to know that truth about ourselves, to know the truth about ultimate reality that we are interfacing with here constantly, which we will call God, that is our spiritual awakening. And so when we get to the first part of the 12th step, which is to have that spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we need to look at what that spiritual awakening is a little bit more specifically, because it's kind of, what is a spiritual awakening? Well, it means something different to each one of us, but let's try to put a little bit more teeth and traction onto that. And I'm going to turn to the 12 and 12, as I love to do. The 12 and 12 is Alcoholics Anonymous' own commentary on the 12 steps and the 12 traditions, and it's just really well done. So when they comment on the 12th step in the 12 and 12, here's what they write. The joy of living. Kind of an interesting place to start, right? The joy of living is the theme of AA's 12th step, and action is the key word. Here we turn outward to our fellow alcoholics who are still in distress. Here we experience the kind of giving that asks no rewards. Here we begin to practice all 12 steps of the program in our daily lives so that we and those about us may find emotional sobriety. When the 12th step is seen in its full implication, it is really talking about the kind of love that has no price tag on it. Our 12th step also says that as a result of practicing all the steps, we have each found something called the spiritual awakening. To new AAers, this often seems like a very dubious and improbable state of affairs. What do you mean when you're talking about a spiritual awakening, they say? Maybe there are as many definitions of spiritual awakening as there are people who have had them, but certainly each genuine one has something in common with all the others. And these things which they have in common are not too hard to understand. When a man or a woman has a spiritual awakening, the most important meaning of it is that he has now become able to do, feel, and believe that which he could not do before on his unaided strength and resources alone. He has been granted a gift which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being. He has been set on a path which tells him he is really going somewhere, that life is not a dead end, not something to be endured or mastered. In a very real sense, he has been transformed because he has laid hold of a source of strength which in one way or another he had hitherto denied himself. He finds himself in possession of a degree of honesty, tolerance, unselfishness, peace of mind, and love of which he had thought himself quite incapable. What he has received is a free gift, and yet usually, at least in some small part, he has made himself ready to receive it. AA's manner of making ready to receive this gift lies in the practice of the 12 steps of our program. So when you put all that together, what is he really saying? What are they saying? They're saying that we're in partnership with God. See, one of the difficulties with Western Christianity is it has become very passive. All we have to do is come under the blood covering, and then everything is done for us, and then just wait for rapture or death, right, to get our reward. But this is not what Jesus is telling us. And this is certainly not what AA is telling us. There is something for us to do. We are in partnership with God. Yes, our acceptance is free. It's a free gift. But we have to work really, really hard to get ready to accept that gift. That's the rub. We don't work for the gift. We already have the gift. But we have to work really hard to accept the gift, to receive the gift. And that's the difference between the two. It's not passive. It's very active. So about this gift, how do we know we have it? How do we know we have the gift? As 12 and 12 says, is it when we can do things that we couldn't do before? When we can just do God's will? Is that when we know we have this gift? However we understand God's will. Well, I'd say probably yes and no. There's a great answer for you, right? It comes down to the difference between obedience and transformation, which we've talked about so many times before. But I want to read you a little passage from Paul. Romans and Philippians, okay? Romans, written earlier in his life. Philippians, written at the end of his life. And you don't have it in your handouts, so just listen. This is the famous passage from Paul where he's kind of showing his neurotic side, right? I do not understand my own actions. For I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now, if I do what I do not want, I agree with the law. That is good. So now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh. For I have the desire to do what is right, but not the ability to carry it out. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep on doing. Now, if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells within me. So I find it to be a law that when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God in my inner being, but I see in my members another law waging war against the law of my mind and making me captive to the law of sin that dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? All right, that sounds a little neurotic, don't you think? I mean, completely at war with himself, you know? What is he actually doing? Well, he's saying, you know, I understand all this. I get it. This is why it's not enough to think it. Because what he's fighting against is those core beliefs, the deep unconscious programming. That's what drives the bus. And until we actually bring that up into consciousness, we can't release it. It's always going to be working against us. That's why no matter how you try to stop drinking, you're not going to be able to do it, or to stop the other things that you try to stop in your life. until you finally become aware of what is actually causing those thought and behavior patterns in you. Release those fears, and then everything can start to change, but it's from the inside out. So he's talking about this. If you keep working the way he's working, right? He's kind of neurotic here at this point in Rome, but if you keep working on it, eventually you move, if you're thinking about it this way, past just obedience, past just trying to follow the law, and something else takes place. So listen to Paul again in Philippians. This is near the end of his life. Maybe 15 years have passed between these two letters. Who knows, 10 to 15 years? At Philippians 4:4, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your heart and your minds in Jesus Christ. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Let the rest go. Think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you. I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now, at length, you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. Not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever circumstances to be content. Huge statement. I know how to be brought low, and I know how to abound. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. That's a far cry from Romans. Do you see what has happened here? Instead of simply grinding out obedience as he was trying to do, he has now found the joy of living from the inside out. Not just doing things for the sake that he believes that they need to be done. He has found in himself a completely new state of being from which all the doing naturally flows. It's who he has become. It's not a restriction anymore, as James calls it, the law of liberation, right? The law of liberation. It's not a restriction. It's just you naturally doing what the law prescribes. So if we know we have a gift, do we know we have a gift? If we're simply joyful, if we're simply having that pink cloud moment, does that mean that we've had our spiritual awakening? Let's take a look at Matthew 13. This is Jesus speaking now. At verse 44, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in the field, which a man found and hid again. That always puzzled me. If you found the treasure, why would you hide it again, right? And from joy over it, he goes out and sells all that he has and buys that field. And at verse 45, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant seeking fine pearls. And upon finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. See, it's the kingdom, the treasure, the truth, our true selves, the spiritual awakening. We know where it is. It's right there. But we can't receive it until we sell everything that we have and make ourselves ready to receive it. But again, here we're talking about the joy and the excitement, right? Jesus is. The excitement of knowing this truth, knowing where it is. But emotion, that pink cloud feeling, that endorphin-rich pink cloud, is really just a byproduct of the spiritual awakening. It's not the spiritual awakening itself. It's like the parables that he's talking about here. Both of these men were awakened through their seeking, through the practice of their seeking. A merchant constantly going through his day, what he did. The farmer going through his day and what he did. And then there was a point where they broke through to an epiphany, and there was great joy over that, as we all feel that rush when we finally get an epiphany. And it allowed them then to more completely surrender themselves, to sell everything, to start again, to let go of what was limiting them in the first place. That serial surrender takes another big step forward. Interesting how all of this works. We know we're awake. We know we've had our spiritual awakening when we become content in all our circumstances, free of the fear, free of the anxiety, enough to more and more let go of these cherished but limiting beliefs, cherished but limiting behavior. It doesn't hold us anymore. We don't have to fight it and resist it so hard. We're just moving in new directions. We're looking at what is good and commendable, and other things are displaced and start to fall away. It's a different way of moving through life, moving in radical new directions, and we can actually begin to enjoy the ride. Imagine that. As difficult as life may be, as difficult as it has been for you as you've experienced it, even recently, can you still be content in your circumstances? Can you still enjoy the ride? At that point, we are realizing more and more that this spiritual awakening has taken place in us. It happens not even realizing it has happened. You realize after the fact, I'm handling things differently than I did before. I'm enjoying things more than I did before. I'm seeing things that went right past me before. And so that brings us to the second part, the helping others, carrying this message to other people. So now, does this mean that we need to be fully aware and fully awake in order to be able to help others? When is that going to happen? When are you going to be fully aware and fully awake, right? If you're waiting for that, remember, it's a serial surrender. Remember the old joke? Two people running away from a bear, and one turns to the other and says, "You can't outrun a bear. I don't think we're going to make it." And the other one says, "Well, I don't have to be faster than the bear. I just have to be faster than you." You know, it's kind of like that. We don't have to be perfect. It's progress, not perfection after all, right? We don't have to be perfect. We just have to have something to offer a person in a given moment. And we have to be aware enough to know what that is, to be able to see them as they are and what need they have and be able to offer it. And truthfully, we can only know what we have to give when we give it away, free and clear. That's the only way we know we really own something, possess it, is when we can give it away. You know, we just purchased Marion's car. It's actually ours now. Got the title. Bank doesn't own it. The leasing company doesn't. It's our car. So I could give it to you because I've got the title. It's mine, free and clear. The only way you know, you're not going to get it, by the way, Danielle, I'm sorry. Yeah. The only way we ever know that we own something, completely possess it, is when we can give it away, free and clear. And then to see our gift to another in action in their lives is to know that it was ours to give. This is the way it works. Look how Jesus says it in the fifth beatitude at Matthew 5:7. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. So you're giving mercy and you're receiving mercy. And when we hear something like that, we're putting a space between the two because that's what we always do. I go to work today, I'm going to get a paycheck at the end of the week or the end of the month. If I'm really good now, God's going to reward me in heaven. This is what we do. We make it spatial. But that's not what Jesus is talking about. The giving and the receiving here are not separated in time. The giving of mercy is the receiving of mercy. The giving of mercy is to finally recognize and understand that you have already received the mercy, or you wouldn't have any mercy to give. Do you see how this works? It's all one moment. It's all absolutely simultaneous. We only can know that we are loved when we give love away to someone who's equally undeserving. How in the world are we going to believe that God really loves us, as unlovely and as horrible as we know ourselves to be, as that little voice inside our heads is always telling us that we're not good enough? How are we going to believe that God really loves us when we can love and give love to someone equally undeserving, the enemy, as Jesus calls it? When that happens at that moment, we know how God can also love us because we are experiencing it in ourselves. We only know that our awakening is real when we can give our presence, our wakefulness, away to somebody else. That's how it works. Simultaneously, it's in the giving that we understand what we actually have. And that brings us to the third part, to practice these principles in all our affairs. And here's where we have to understand that the 12th step is much more than just service and helping others. Typically, the shorthand is it's all about turning it back out and helping each other, right? But I want to submit to you that the service portion of this, the helping others, is also a byproduct. It is not the thing itself. Because this waking up to all of life creates the joy of living that simply can't be contained. You don't have to think about how you're going to parcel it out or give it to anybody. You're just going to walk around and people are going to end up in your blast zone and they're going to get the joy of living that you have to receive. I know you know people like this. You want them at your party. You love to see them at work because they are just the person who lights up the room. They're not doing anything special. They're just showing up, you know. You gravitate to people like that. You're attracted to people like that because they leave you better than they found you. They make you feel good about yourself. Look at Francis of Assisi. This is in your handouts. Preach the gospel continuously. Use words where necessary. We don't have to preach anything. We don't have to try to persuade anybody of anything or convince them. All we have to do is show up with this joie de vivre, right? With this love for life. That's the most persuasive we could ever be. I'll have what she's having, right? And then Augustine of Hippo has nothing to do with the hippopotamus, by the way. That is a city in North Africa. Love God and do as you please. A recipe for disaster if you don't get the first part right. But if you really love God, which means you are experiencing God's love, then anything you do is going to be right in the center of that love. How could it be otherwise? You see, we come full circle in the steps. We are literally arriving where we started. Powerless. That's where we started this journey. And this is what we're coming back to. But as we come back to it on the 12th step, we're going to know that powerlessness for the first time. And I know it's counterintuitive because helping others seems like you're powerful, right? Helping others seems like you're in the superior position, working downward. But really what happens in those exchanges with each other, we begin to realize that we have no power to fix anybody anyway. Hopefully you've already experienced that. We're merely showing up and being who we are and giving whatever helping hand we can possibly give at that moment. And we can start to finally know the pure dependence of the reality of our being. We are dependent on each other and on God. And that comes through in our relationships, practiced in humility, practice in powerlessness as we finally start to come to understand it. That all we have is ours to give to others only because it's been first freely given to us. Freely you have received, now freely give. Jesus tells his disciples as he sends them out. And what's our signature line here always? We love because you first loved us, from James 4. That's not James. 1 John. But that's the idea. We have been lavished with these gifts. We will never know that we have them because it was so free we didn't have to think about it. But when it leaves us in the direction of another person, then we finally know what's going on. It's like that treasure in the field. It's already ours. We already know where it is, right here, right now. But until we sell everything, until we let go, we won't be ready to receive it. So it's not about searching for meaning out there. Fox Mulder was wrong. The truth is not out there. A little bit too obscure allusion here for no X-Filers here. It's not about searching for meaning out there. It's awakening to the meaning that's already here. I wanted to close this morning with a blog post that I wrote some while back. Shoot, I meant to put a picture up, and I forgot to give it to Alex. So look real hard at this picture. You can see that, right? What it is two little girls standing on a grate, and the warm air is blowing up and blowing their skirts Marilyn Monroe style. And it's the funniest thing. Brain fade. When I saw this, it just, and the caption I have underneath is, does your faith make you feel like this? You watch these two girls, and they're just experiencing, imagine that rush of warm air, and your skirts are blowing, and, does your faith make you feel like this? And so I wrote this based on this photo. Someone recently told me that he needed excitement in his life, that there was nothing to look forward to. Someone else was telling me that she was completely dry, and the work she used to love was uninspiring and dead to her, that the coworkers and clients she still loved deserved more and better than she could deliver. I could certainly understand. I'm sure we've all been there, done that, feeling the edges of burnout or ennui, crowding into the corners of our eyes, threatening a hostile takeover. Truth is, regardless of how we view them, our lives are made of moments, nothing more. Just a string of moments from birth to death, or better, a single moment constantly changing in its detail and composition. And most of those moments, or the details of that one moment, are usually pretty ordinary, commonplace, what we'd call boring from a certain point of view. We keep looking for our moments to inspire us, to fill us from the outside with the meaning we can't find on the inside. But this moment right now, like an island, is self-contained. If we don't bring meaning here, we won't find it here. The circumstances of our moments have no intrinsic meaning. Everything in life is equally meaningless or meaningful, depending on what we bring to the party. If we spend our moments waiting for or trying to manufacture those rare, peak, exciting moments, then our lives become flyover country, like the plains of Nebraska we fly over to get to the coasts. And all those precious moments, viewed from 30,000 feet, appear flat and dimensionless. But we are all just a moment away from transformation. And when we can simply revel in the warm updraft from a grate ballooning our skirts, when we can come back down to earth and fill our moments with our presence, our moments will be full of presence, exciting and meaningful, and not a moment before. Each journey, and the 12 steps are a journey, bring us back full circle. We don't have to go look for meaning out there. It's already here. The key is not to miss the opportunity to embrace it, even if it doesn't look like anything that we expected. We need to let the joy of living seep into every moment of our lives. You see, the powerlessness of step one, when we experience it the first time as step one, is painful. It's a mark of our desperation that we will finally admit that we are powerless. But it's painful and it's disturbing. It's disorienting. But by the time we get to step 12 and come full circle, it brings us into the joy of powerlessness that we missed the first time around. It brings to us the freedom from fear that allows us and makes powerless vulnerability in God's embrace a joy to receive. And there is no way to become convinced of the joy of powerlessness and how it transforms our lives without taking the journey. We must take the journey to find out we didn't have to take the journey because everything was already here. But without the journey, we will never know. That's what Jesus is trying to teach us. And that's what the steps can codify for us along the way. Let's pray. Father, you've created our lives in such a way that there is the perfect mix of everything that we need to take this journey. This journey that you have imagined for us, that you pray into existence for us, is the knowing of everything that you've already given us from the very beginning. It's amazing. It doesn't seem right. It's so hard for us to be able to see things from your point of view. So once again, Lord, we just ask that you help us take each and every step along the way. And to trust that in doing so, in each step, each footfall, we are closer to more and more understanding, closer to letting go of the things that are limiting our vision, and closer to you and the experience of your love. So just help us to take whatever step we need to take this moment. That's enough for us. We'll leave the rest in your care. We'll just take this step and the one after. So help us to trust. Help us to trust that you are with us with each footfall and that nothing can harm us along this way to you, as long as it is you that we desire. And we do, Lord. So, Father, thank you. Thank you for caring for us this much. And never let us forget we can only love because you loved us first. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's all stand.